from the experience. There I was, committed to 2 choir practices a week on Tuesdays and Fridays, 3 services on Sunday, and as many weddings on a Saturday that required the services of the boy sopranos. Weddings were the best because we got paid for them. At first, I got 9 pence for each one, which increased to 1 shilling and 6pence when I eventually became head chorister. So if we did 3 or 4 weddings on a Saturday, the proceeds would go a long way in Lowman's store, with a lot left over for the odd puncture kit for the bike or a visit to the local indoor swimming pool. 4 Old English pennies to get in and 3 to buy a bag of hot chips from the fish and chip shop on the way home. My life very quickly began to revolve around the church and the 2.5-mile walk to and from it. It would take me past Lowman's and on to the churchyard with its narrow, winding asphalt path that threaded its way through tilting ancient gravestones, leading straight past the vestry to the west door of the church. The path was faintly lit with sparsely placed lamp-posts, which on a foggy night in midwinter threw a mysterious damp haze on the gravestones and the gathering of young boys waiting impatiently for the arrival of our great leader, Mr. Felton Rapley, the choirmaster and extremely accomplished organist of St. Martin's Parish Church in Epsom. Mr. Rapley was a very large man, who always seemed to be in a hurry. He had a serious, all-knowing face like an owl. He had thick horn-rimmed glasses, thinning grey hair, and a grey walrus moustache. He was intimidating to an 8-year-old. However, he was to become my mentor during the next few years. Perhaps he was my first hero. Sometimes I would arrive early for choir practice, and as I approached the church I could hear him rehearsing his next recital. I would sit outside on the wall by the vestry door in the dark, transfixed by the sheer size of the organ's sound penetrating the dimly lit stained-glass windows. The whole sensation was magnified by the fact that it was taking place in the middle of a graveyard that dated back to the 15th century. There is nothing quite like the experience of singing with a large group of people, your senses being bombarded by all those harmonics and actually contributing some of your own. Felton Rapley spotted my enthusiasm quite early on and quietly took me under his wing. As I grew older, he encouraged me more and more, giving me the odd solo and slowly boosting my confidence until he made me head chorister at the age of 11. He was considered to be one of the finest pipe organists in the country, performing regularly on BBC radio. He would give a recital every 4th Sunday after evensong, and one such Sunday he asked if I would stay after the service and turn pages for him. I naturally jumped at the chance to see the great man perform. We could never see him when he played during a service. The organ loft was way up above us, some 30 or 40 feet, surrounded by this massive array of pipes, rather like a giant Gulliver's panpipes. Although this was opposite where I stood in the choir stalls, I could only ever see his balding head and his shoulders swaying, physically accenting what he played. He had a long mirror up above his head, so he could keep his eye on the transgressors eating boiled sweets or reading the Beano or Eagle comic during one of those interminably boring sermons. Evensong finished, and I followed Mr. Rapley as he propelled himself up the steep, narrow stone spiral staircase that led from the vestry up to the organ loft, his enormous frame brushing the walls on either side, with his long black gown flowing behind him. He almost seemed short of breath on the flat, as a result of him smoking large numbers of senior service cigarettes when outside the confines of the church, so by the time he made it to the top, he seemed to be completely knackered. He sat down heavily on one end of the organ bench, bent over, and with some difficulty changed his shoes for a pair of patent leather slippers. I remember being terribly impressed, having never seen anything quite so opulent. He swung round, squeezing himself between the bench and the 3 keyboards that fanned out in front of him, set the music on its stand, and pressed a couple of preset buttons, which caused the 2 vertical banks of porcelain knobs on either side of the keyboard to jump in and out with great speed and a resounding thump. As he began to play, he was transformed before my very eyes. His energy level seemed to quadruple. The cumbersome movement of his somewhat overweight body disappeared and became fluid. his fingers flying across the keyboard with extraordinary speed and accuracy.
To keep listening to this audiobook, I've left you a link in the description so you can do it, at no cost thanks to Audible's 30-day free trial.